Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
About whether it's time to change the law north of the border. And we'll also be hearing from Stella Creasy as she launches a cross-party charge to persuade MPs in Westminster to push through reforms. We'll be talking about the state of the nation's schools with Education Minister Nick Gibb, and I've been to Nottingham to check in on a company that might just be a blueprint for the future of the energy market under a Jeremy Corbyn government. But first, this week President Trump fired the starting gun on a trade war that spared neither friend nor foe. 25% tariffs on steel, 10% on aluminium, and despite months of frenzied lobbying from Brussels and Whitehall, no exemption for the EU. So not great timing for Theresa May's dream of a buccaneering, free-trading global Britain. Well, joining us in the studio now is a man who'd be charged with delivering on that vision in a Labour government, the Shadow International Trade Secretary, Barry Gardiner. Hello, thanks for being with us.
Morning, Sophie. Can I just say how nice it is to see you back? That's the first thing. And also, because it is a year on, to pay our respects to those who are the victims of the London bombing attack last year, the terror attack last year.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think we can all endorse that statement from you, certainly. I want to talk to you about Donald Trump because, of course, he's slapped these hefty tariffs on steel and aluminium. 34,000 jobs depend on the industry in Britain. I mean, are those jobs at risk now?
Certainly, I think those companies will feel the outcomes of those tariffs. The whole point of the President doing this is to try and increase the costs for American businesses to buy British steel and European steel. That has to have an effect on our jobs here. There are certain parts of the market that we supply into America which are highly specialised. There are companies like Sheffield Forge Masters, companies like Liberty Steel, which actually do very high-grade speciality steel. I think what we'll see as a result of the tariffs being imposed is actually their market share will probably not suffer because America has to buy that. They don't have many other options.
But it's others who may be more at risk.
Yeah, but of course, the embarrassing thing for President Trump is that as the costs of steel in America go up because they're paying this extra 25% tariff, so also jobs in America will be lost in those industries which are producing goods that need steel.
Let's talk about the UK as well, though, because at a time when a trade war could be kicking off, is it really the right time for Labour to have a policy of leaving the single market, making it harder to do business with our biggest trading partner?
Well, actually, that's the reason that we have the policy that we have on a customs union, a new customs union with the European Union, in which we would be still negotiating trade agreements as part of a 500 million strong consumer bloc.
But let's get real, though, because
hang on.
It was still. I just
Sophie,
want to pick, but I do want to pick up on what you were saying about the customs union, because I know that's your policy, of course. But it will be harder to trade if you leave the single market, won't it?
Sorry, I need to make this point because actually trade in goods and the tariffs and the quotas that are applied to goods that are coming into the European Union and into the UK, the common tariffs that we apply and the tariffs as between ourselves, which would be zero in a customs union, means that that trade in goods would continue uninterrupted. And that's precisely why we have that policy. And the Tories' red line is actually going to make it much, much more difficult because they're the ones who will be isolated. They will be minnows trying to compete against whales. They will be a 70 million strong consumer market against America's 500 million.
OK, because you just said that the trade in goods will be uninterrupted in a customs union. Let's just have a look at this slide. This is what Michel Barnier, the chief negotiator for the EU, says are the total checks that will be needed if we leave the EU. Now, this looks really complicated, but basically the two things in red are the checks that will be removed if we are still in a customs union. All the rest, if we leave the single market, are still going to apply. So I don't understand how you can sit here and say that there will be uninterrupted trade in goods if we leave the single market.
Look, there's two elements. This is a slide. We can go through every single one of these elements. You've made it as complicated as possible.
No,
you have, actually. You've made it as complicated as possible so your viewers get the view that
this is from the EU.
Yeah.
And the point I'm trying to illustrate is that there are multiple rules and lots of different regulations, as you would.
It was a table which Barnier produced in order to deal with what the government's proposals had been, which was for this maximum facilitation agreement, which actually our own civil servants would cost £20 billion a year.
I want to talk about the customs union and the fact that the customs union doesn't just completely erase. It's not a magic bullet, is it?
No.
There are still barriers to trade if we're in a customs union.
If you have a customs union, it deals with the issues of quotas and tariffs between yourselves, which are reduced to zero, and it deals with the common setting of quotas and tariffs towards any goods coming in from outside the customs union. It also means that you, the UK, and the EU would negotiate together. You would determine, we would be co-decision makers in any trade negotiations with third parties that we had. And that is the critical thing here when we're looking at people like Trump and the way in which he is moving towards a protectionist market. What we're saying is we would be part of that strong bloc, able to stand up to people like President Trump, and we would not be isolated in the world. The issue of standards and regulations, the regulations are what are governed by the single market. Standards, of course, apply to goods, and we would need to maintain the standards, but the regulatory regime does not apply other than for sanitary and phytosanitary controls, does not apply to goods in the same way.
Now, as Shadow International Trade Secretary, you're going to be in charge, if Labour in power, of kind of winning trade deals around the world. Would you be happy to see immigration go up if that was a prerequisite to get a trade deal with places like India or China?
We don't know what sort of deal we're going to end up with, and if we do have the privilege of serving as a government, we don't know yet whether we will have done the negotiations or whether, in fact, those negotiations would have been done by the Conservatives and we would be left picking up the pieces. So it's a completely hypothetical
but the
situation.
Negotiations aren't going to be wrapped up by the time of the next election in all likelihood, are they? So.
Who knows? I mean, if you listen to the sort of blue-on-blue noise that's going on this morning between Tories attacking Tories in the newspapers, we could have a general election later on this year. But I want to try and respond to the perfectly proper question that you're putting, and that is, what would the movement of people look like in a new situation? As the Conservatives wish to negotiate it, But let's talk about you, though. I know you want to talk about the Conservatives, but let's talk about what Labour would do. I think people want to know that as well. But there are different scenarios here. That's what I'm saying. There's a scenario in which we've negotiated with the European Union. What we would want to do is we would want to negotiate manage migration, fair rules, management of migration, reasonable management of migration coming into this country so that we're sure that the immigration that comes into the country is good for the country.
It's a simple question, though. Are you comfortable with immigration going up?
We will always set our immigration policy to benefit jobs and the economy. The mistake that the Conservatives have always made on this is that they've said they would set an arbitrary target for their immigration figure and they would then let the economy bear the consequences. We've said that what you do, the sensible thing to do, is to say, what does our economy need? Let's make sure we have the skills to match those needs.
So, in other words, then, if it did mean we get a good trade deal with India, you would be happy to relax the visa requirements to help it go?
Trade has always fluctuated, and so has migration into this country. We need to have the skills that we need to produce the benefits to our economy.
I'm still getting confused about your answer.
No, you're not. Actually, you just don't like it.
No, that's not true.
It's not that you're confused about it.
I'm just trying to unpick.
Because I'm being quite clear. What I've said is our immigration figures will always fluctuate. They always have, and they'll fluctuate in terms of the needs of our economy. Now, you asked a specific question about India. The irony here is that the Prime Minister, Theresa May, went over to India, I think, twice last year.
And I'm asking about your policy.
No,
are you happy? Would you be happy with immigration
when she went over
on?
there was the Times of India ran a headline that said,
okay,
you want our business, but you don't want our people. This is a problem. This is a problem for our trade, because what we need to do is to ensure that companies who want to come here from India and China and the rest of the world, who want to invest here, are able to bring their people here in order to prosper in our economy. We need that. That's a benefit to us, and we must recognise it in exactly the same way that we should be recognising the benefits of the highly skilled migrant workers who are now being told that they are being deported from the country because of their tax regularities under a criminal terrorist piece of legislation. This is extraordinary what is going on. The Home Affairs Select Committee has been looking at that, and Sajid Javid needs to as well.
Now, before you go, I can't help but ask you about Labour Live, this festival of the summer, reportedly struggling a little bit with ticket sales.
I'm going.
You're going? There you go. Well, there's my
going.
first question done. And my second question. Last week, we had Jonathan Ashworth on, who sort of suggested he might be up for performing a bit of Engelbert Humperdinck if he was asked. Apparently, that's a favourite with his kids.
Wow.
We hear you're a bit of a champion whistler. Would you be doing a turn at Labour Live?
I haven't been asked to do that yet.
I like that, yet.
I don't know about Engelbert Humperdinck, but, my wife always says that she wants to see me doing Elvis impressions, so, hey, who knows?
Thanks very much for your time this morning,
It was a pleasure.
Mr. Gardiner.